Hello everyone and welcome to the Culture Cast. I'm Chris Stashu and I am joined by my good friend, the creator of OughtFiveFilms on YouTube, the one and only, the incorrigible Mr. Mike Wallace.
Incorrigible? Incorruptible, maybe.
Oh boy. Those ghosts try every day to corrupt you and you fight the power of darkness.
That is true, man.
The power of light.
That's it. Or am I actually on their side?
Well, that too. I don't know. That's why you're always getting touched by the ghosts, because they're trying to reach out to you to let you know that they're there ready to turn on everyone.
Well, I actually think I'm a facilitator and then I bring them fresh victims. So
that too. Oh, really? Keep the theatrics up.
Yes.
Talking about ghosts aside, on this Culture Cast, we're going to be talking about the second film of Documentary Month. First film we talked about was Jesus Camp. I did that with Mike White. If you haven't listened to that one, go check it out. We talk about religion, which is something that we really haven't talked about on the Culture Cast before. So if you want to hear my thoughts on religion and Mr. Mike White from the Projection Booth's thoughts, go check that out. However, on this Culture Cast, we are talking about Why We Fight. The film is directed by Eugene-Jarecki. It was released in 2005, and it is about the military-industrial complex. If you don't know what that means, strap in, ladies and gentlemen, because we are about to blow your fucking mind.
From the White House, we present Dwight D. Eisenhower.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. In the councils of government, we must guard against the military-industrial complex.
The United States is the greatest force for good in the world. We have not an obligation to go out and start wars, certainly to spread democracy and freedom throughout the world.
The defense budget is $750 billion. Profits went up last year well over 25%. When war becomes that profitable, you're going to see more of it.
There is a huge flow of cash into defense industries.
$66 billion for our men and women in uniform.
$100 million to upgrade 10 additional B-1 bombers.
You do have to follow the money.
It's the representative's duty to bring home the bacon.
God bless our contractors.
Now, kids are dying. Billions are being spent every month.
And the American people are scratching their heads going, how do we get here?
This is not about one president or one party.
When does the United States go from a force for good to a force of imperialism?
We've got an empire. There is no excuse for 725 American military bases in 130 foreign countries.
I think numbers almost are distracting.
9/11 showed us war can be privatized, instruction can be privatized. What we are risking is the republic itself.
Collusion is our business. Collusion with the military.
We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes.
It is nowhere written that the American empire goes on forever.
All right, Mr. Wallace, so this was the first time you've seen this film?
Yes. I mean, I had heard of it at the time, and I sort of read about it because it, it achieved a certain amount of acclaim at the time. And I feel like all the information presented in the movie eventually got disseminated into the public consciousness, but this is the first time sort of sitting beginning to end watching.
So what did you think watching the actual film and the content from the source for the first time?
I don't feel like I learned a ton, but I think it's an incredibly well-made documentary. Certainly wasn't boring in any way. And, it's a subject matter that I think more people need to know about if they hadn't. I mean, if you have not seen the movie, I'm going to recommend it just out of hand. I do think it's very good. I think it's obviously, every documentary is sort of slanted one way or the other. And when we get into sort of political discussions, people can say, well, they're coming from a leftist or from a right kind of point of view. And I think this is a little more balanced than most. I think it has its own agenda, but I think it plays fair, unlike some of the other documentarians out there. I really, I dig it. I think, it's not a lighthearted romp by any stretch of the imagination. As far as the view of America that we have, this is something most people should be aware of.
So you're saying that Dinesh D'Souza has a bias?
I'm saying that maybe. I'm going to say he might be coming with an agenda, yes.
Yeah, Dinesh D'Souza is human garbage. Yes.
Yes.
But Abraham Lincoln and Donald Trump are the same person, according to him. So.
Oh, of course, because the Republican Party that freed the slaves is the same Republican Party of today, right?
Change my mind that it's not. I'm that guy sitting at the table. Change my mind. Convince me otherwise. I had never seen this before, but again, similarly to you, It's one of those films that I had been told about, and the information had been, like you said, disseminated to me through articles and just, reading up on it. When I was in high school, I had a teacher who showed clips from this movie.
Oh, really?
And yeah. And he always told us to challenge everything, because that's important. And that's something important to tell the younger generation, is do not take everything at face value. I think it's important to be kind of open-minded about stuff, especially about stuff that's coming directly from the government. And we can get into conspiracy theory stuff later, but for me personally, that's something that I believe. I am a huge non-believer in the government's, the information that comes directly from them is always slanted in one way or another. I'm not a believer of the rah-rah America, we're the greatest country on the planet thing. It's not true. It's just not. There's a lot of problems with that statement. And this film talks about a lot of that. And especially us feeling the need to be the world peacekeepers, because we need to have a standing military. Well, we don't have a standing military, thank God, but we need to have a military to fight others, to keep our interests in line and our interests continue in the future. And I think that that's something that everyone, like you said, needs to know about.
The movie doesn't downplay the actual need for a military, which I believe in. I think, I'm not such a lefty sort of peacenik that I don't think that that we need to do without. I think we definitely need an army and Marines and such. And we do need to protect our interests as far as this country. However, what that has turned into from World War II to today, just kind of despicable.
Well, people are furthering their own personal and financial interests over the quote-unquote interests of the country at large.
Yeah, America's always called the great experiment, and if you view it through the sort of military lens, then we've sort of failed that experiment. Because I do look, I'm not going to say America's the greatest country on earth. I think what the ideals behind it might be. I love America in that I like the idea of all the refuse from the rest of the world getting together and making their own nation. Maybe I'm, too idealistic in that way, but that really appeals to me.
That was almost the beginning of The Godfather right there. I love America.
Yeah, well, that speech is true, man. There is, in my opinion, a lot to love about the country. However, there's a lot that is problematic.
And that has been, and it's not just a Donald Trump thing. Because I think that's a huge problem now when we talk about, when we talk about a film like this, right? This film was made in 2005, 3 years shy of the Obama administration, which had its problems, just like every other administration does.
Sure.
People like to forget the fact that they were using drones to blow up civilians and shit like that during even the Obama administration. And during every administration, it has its problems, and people just like to have selective memory because it's better to remember the good as opposed to question the bad. And I think the problem is, like you said, if we're viewing America as the great experiment, the one variable that makes the experiment fail is human beings.
And greed. And I don't like getting into political arguments as far as economics go. As what is the best economic system? Was it communism or socialism? Was it fascism or capitalism? The problem with capitalism makes people work hard, and you can get ahead, and those are all great things, but it's a machine that always needs to be fed. The basic sort of tenets of capitalism is you have to do better the next year than you did the previous. In America, what they learned after World War II, according to this documentary, and common sense, is that there's a lot of money to be made in warfare. So it's in the country's best interest to constantly be at war. It benefits very few. It certainly doesn't benefit the troops on the ground, who are fighting for those ideals that we're talking about. I can't say that anyone sort of joining the military to protect freedom and America aren't getting into it for anything more than those ideals.
But the reason the people that are having the military is not for that.
Yes, exactly. And that's the great lie, completely deplorable one. As I just said, I mean, you love this country for those ideals and you want to like go fight for them, but you're not fighting for them. You're fighting because, this guy needs another yacht, basically. Like, they want to make more and more and more. And it is an inexhaustible resource, the military is. It's like the one thing you can constantly keep manufacturing, and it's never going to run out of style, It's not like a Ford automobile. Like, eventually they're going to go bankrupt. Like, we're never going to stop fighting.
No, we're not. And it's what's really telling is when they ask people in the film why we fight over and over. And the answers from normal folks, it's what you were talking about. It's the idea of what America is and what it should be and what the military is for. The military in the United States should be for protecting our domestic interests and protecting ourselves against foreign invasion. Yeah, but the likelihood of that happening, unfortunately, I think at this point is so nil that anyone saying that, it's like, come on, don't you know better than that? Like, who's going to invade us? Canada?
Right.
Who's going to invade us?
Yeah.
Mexico? Like, that's the only two options at this point, because it would have to be some sort of massive coastal attack. And so it's like, you think about it that way, you are fighting for someone else's agenda, be it oil, be it control of resources, aka oil. It's really fucked up. And this film does a really good job of showing that being in war and being in a constant state of fighting with people benefits certain folks, Northrop Grumman, any of the large military manufacturers of ammunition, boots. I like how they showed boots in the film. Because that's one of those things you don't think about.
Exactly. Yeah, that was sobering. Another sobering idea was I had not considered this, even knowing what the military-industrial complex, even knowing that this is a constant state of greed that keeps us fighting. There are certain things that they pointed out, like the idea of independent contractors taking over some jobs that the military used to do, as something as simple as like food preparation or laundry. Like, the soldiers used to do that. They would have people washing the clothes and cooking the meals and stuff. But like, here's another way we can make money. We'll hire people to work for the military doing those things because we don't want the soldiers to have to do it because they have to fight, right? But really, it's just another sort of psychotic form of greed. Like, how can we make even more money off of this perpetual war machine? It's a very sickening portrait of America in some ways, this documentary.
The thing is, when you look at it with everything being monetized in the United States and everything being corporatized, like you said, clothes washing, boot manufacturing, food preparation, it's like someone is making $1. So,
yeah.
And so this kind of, it's one of the things I think about, and I was thinking about it today because I was having to deal with it personally, is in the city of Lincoln, last year, they passed a bill to keep cardboard out of the landfill. Okay. Now, that's fine. I understand why they're doing it. I think that recycling, personally, is kind of bullshit. And there's a lot of things to show that it is. Because a lot of things that they recycle is, they expend more energy recycling it than they would if they just took it and threw it in the landfill. So, that being aside, but what I found funny is, now that they've banned cardboard in the landfill, the only way to get rid of cardboard is to have a recycling can in front of your house.
Okay.
The recycling cans, however, are not free. The recycling cans are an additional $5 a house. So, in my mind, I'm thinking someone had an agenda, follow the trail of money, see if someone has ties to that in town, or is being lobbied, or something to that effect. And it's the same thing here. You look at who benefits from this, and it's pretty apparent. Who benefits from us fighting all the time? These companies. And who are these companies lobbying? Yeah, who are they lobbying? The politicians.
And that's the crazy thing. Like, growing up, we'd all heard the term the military-industrial complex. So we always assumed that what we're talking about is some sort of collusion between the military and corporate America. And that itself is like a disgusting combination. But this film posits that at first it says there was a third leg to this horrible beast, and that is Congress. And like these sort of congressional people who are pushing through the agendas of these companies to get the wars going. And then when they retire from Congress, then they have a nice cushy job where they're going to make tens of millions of dollars in that company. So I think I even knew that much. But then they bring up the concept of the think tank, which is the new sort of the fourth side of this, not even a triangle anymore. Now it's a square of like these think tanks whose whole idea is to find ways to start wars, to justify those wars. So that like it's this weird now like endless cycle of people coming up with the reason that the corporations can get involved, so that the political wing can get the war started, and then the military can benefit from it. It's just, oh my God, man! What a morass! It's frightening, to say the least.
Well, and again, it goes back to human beings and putting their personal interests ahead of the interests of others. You have this gentleman in the film who's like a New Yorker who enlists in the U.S. military because his mother died. And he's like, I've never had anything good in my life. The military is going to have me set for life when I get out. I'm going to be able to protect the country. And it's like, dude, you're buying in. And that's the whole thing with this film, is that it's trying to tell you is, as a society, for the most part, everyone buys in to the idea. Because if you don't buy into the idea, which is what this documentary talks about, if you don't buy into this idea, all you end up doing is questioning every single motive that the government ever had in regards to war. Because it's all about control. And it's wartime, and they talk about it in the film, they talk about wartime imperialism. And they talk about colonialism, because a lot of it is colonialism. We're going to bring our American values to the Middle East. Why? Why do we need to?
Yeah, and they don't couch it in that term. They don't call it imperialism or colonialism. It's always spreading a democracy and a liberty and our cultural identity to them. I love that there was one brief shot where they were talking to a woman in Iraq, and they said, so do you want to be more like America? And she was like, well, we want their roads and their gardens, but that's about it. And like, so, you know, they're not looking to become America every place that we effectively go and conquer. And you know what drives me crazy about this, Chris, because I've thought about this quite a bit. And you can say that we defeated the Soviet Union simply by outspending them, which is, you know, true in a way. But it seems to me that, like, culturally speaking, like, you can wear your enemies down better. You know, just beaming MTV into Moscow was doing as much as changing the minds of like young kids and teenagers, like, about their country and the way it runs. Like maybe there is another way in the Western world that it could be attractive to them. But ultimately, we're not looking to spread these sort of American ideals. What we're looking to do is make as much money as we can, and we just look around the world and go, where can we make it? There. Let's manufacture a reason to go there and go take it. And it's fucking disgusting. It's absolutely the antithesis of those ideals we were talking about as far as most people believe in America, freedom and democracy. Someone says in the documentary, you know, like, the propaganda machine that's sort of in place is effectively like a totalitarian regime, just on kind of a smaller level.
Well, and here's the thing, right? So, and this comes back to more recent times, because again, this film is 13 years old now.
Yeah.
But it feels just as prescient now as it did 13 years ago. And obviously, Mike White isn't joining us on this podcast, but last week he joined me on Jesus Camp. He curated this entire month for me. And so, I would say you and I can both agree as to we understand why he picked this. It's pretty clear, because this film is still just as topical, but again, going back to like a smaller case scenario that you can really look at and kind of draw a bigger picture look is with the NFL football players striking, right? So they're taking a knee. Why are they taking a knee? They're taking a knee because of police brutality in this country against African Americans. However, people in the government have allowed themselves to, and have done it, change the narrative to be something completely different about them completely and utterly effacing the government and the military. And they always talk about the military. They always say that they're against the military. And they're disrespecting the soldiers.
Who fought and died for that flag that they are now disrespecting.
But if you look at why we fight, the soldiers are the ones being being used by the government to die for a flag that there's probably no point for them to defend, because we're not really defending ourselves from anything. We are stirring the hornet's nest in other countries. And I mean, if you look at if you look at Barack Obama's presidency, he was a regime changer as a president. He was in favor of regime change. Look what happened in Libya with Gaddafi, who was essentially run out of town by the Americans recently.
Right.
Or other dictators who were deposed by the U.S., Saddam Hussein, which they talk about in this film. The U.S. is all about regime change, because if your leader does not adapt and reflect our ideals, we don't want them in place.
Yeah.
And what makes me laugh about all of this, and again, I'm not a Republican or a Democrat, I'm a libertarian 100%. It makes me laugh when people are talking about, Jesus Christ, Russia stole the election. This is such a terrible thing. The US does it all the time.
Yeah, right.
It's fucking insane to me that people are sitting and talking about how terrible it is that Russia did it. We finally got at our own game of trying to put a leader in power that leans closer towards our interests. And all of a sudden it happens to us and everybody goes completely apeshit.
Yeah, well, one could say that it happened with the presidency that we're discussing when this documentary was made.
Very true.
With Gore and Bush, was that not a stolen election? I kind of think it was. That
was stolen inside of our own country.
Because they wanted it, and they wanted this sort of thing to happen. I mean, this film makes an excellent case for the fact that, had 9/11 not occurred, this was going to happen anyway.
Yeah.
9/11 provided a convenient scapegoat, because when you needed to go into Iraq, we were going to we wanted those oil fields, and we needed to get our military back up so everyone can fill their coffers. 9/11 happened. It was horrible, but did it originate in any way in the country of Iraq? No, not at all. But we were already poised and ready to go.
Proven fact it didn't.
Yeah.
If anything, we should have gone to war with Saudi Arabia.
Exactly, but we're already friends with them, so we can't attack them.
Well, let's take a quick break. When we get back, we'll talk, because I think we're getting to some good stuff. So we'll take a break. When we get back, we'll finish up talking about the film.
Who is Carl Kolchak?
He's a reporter.
Now that is news, Vincenzo. News! And we are a newspaper. We are supposed to print news, not suppress it.
With the INS.
What's an INS?
Independent news service, sir. Founded in 1904 by Enrico Paluzzi.
Who seems to have a nose for the strange and unusual.
Well, last year in Las Vegas, I uncovered a series of murders that turned out to have been committed by a vampire.
And what is the Kolchak Tapes?
It's a podcast.
All about Carl Kolchak.
What's a Kolchak?
The Night Stalker.
And where can you get it?
On iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and at www.kolchaktapes.com.
As foolish a game as any that Gory the Ghoul could make up.
Socks don't have to come in just black and white, and at Jilly's Socks and Such, you can find not only that unique pair of sassy socks, but also gifts for any occasion. Started by former teacher Lori and former student, now namesake Jillian, their store has a pair of socks for every event, personality, and interest. Be it a snarky pair for work, a pair emblazoned with your favorite sports team, or just something silly for lounging, Jilly's Socks and Such can have you sliding into your new favorite pair of socks today. I just recently picked up a pair of Bigfoot socks that are about as badass as they are comfy, and they are a perfect addition to my growing collection of socks. They are located at 3900 Old Cheney Road, Suite 202, Lincoln, Nebraska, and online at jillysocks.com. Mention the Culture Cast and get 15% off your next purchase at Jilly's, and remember, let your socks do the talking at Jilly's Socks and Such.
Here's what some people are saying about the Projection Booth podcast.
Week after week, I'm mesmerized by the focus given great films and questionable films alike. But every episode is a learning and entertaining experience.
This is hands down the best movie podcast. They cover so many different genres across so many years, from obscure movies to blockbusters.
If there's only one podcast about movies and cinema that you listen to, make it this one.
The Projection Booth Podcast, with new episodes available every week at projectionboothpodcast.com.
All right, we're back. We were talking about people in power that support our country and our ideas. Yeah, 9/11, again, there's a pretty good documentary on HBO called Manhunt, where they talk about the people who were working before 9/11 in the counterterrorism units in the CIA that warned the government about 9/11. Because, by the way, you can go look. This is a thing. People in the government warned other people in the government about 9/11. That was more than likely was going to be a massive terror attack. What did the U.S. government do? That's right. They didn't do anything. And
Nothing at all.
Yeah. And so what happened from it? We had this where we went into Iraq for weapons of mass destruction, which, by the way, did not exist. But again, we were deposing a dictator who no longer supported the values and ideas that the current regime in our government, and yes, I'll use the word regime for our own government, supported. And they wanted him out of there.
Yeah, and the film makes a good case, and this is not the only documentary to have done this, but this is just a fact. During the 1980s, Iran was the big boogeyman in the Middle East. And we had put in our own dictator who got deposed. And they sort of had the revolution in the late 70s, and where the Shah took over. So Iran was the problem, and who could possibly fight Iran? Well, this guy Saddam Hussein. So we put all our support behind him because he was losing the war to Iran. So at that time, Saddam's our friend. There's footage in the movie of like Donald Rumsfeld like shaking hands with Saddam, and then as long as he's there and he's keeping it stabilized and he's not sort of going too far, we'll keep him in place. He, invaded Kuwait, and we went in and kicked him out and didn't continue in. Why not? Because we still needed him there. And at this point, they're like, well, we no longer need him. So now we'll take him out.
And that makes a good point as to why the United States hasn't gone into North Korea yet, because there's nothing we actually really need in North Korea.
Exactly. And that occurred to me, too, while watching the documentary, because, the Bush administration at the time, they mentioned, 3 regimes that needed to come down, and North Korea was one of them. But you're right, there's nothing strategic in our going into North Korea, so we just haven't done it.
Well, and North Korea does have a large cache of naturally occurring metals, but it's not oil. It's not what our country runs on.
It's not the lifeblood of the world.
Yeah, it's not the thing that countries have been fighting over for hundreds of years. Control of a resource. And I mean, it used to be other resources, now it's oil. So, 300 years ago, you had the Spanish invading South America to find gold. Now it's the Americans invading the Middle East to get the oil. So it's really fucked up. But again, coming back to the way the film presents it presents it in a way that's so not laid back, but it's like I'm more riled up by the film than the film itself riles up. There are some documentaries that I've seen that are they're really like going at it. They're punching you with every single fact, and they want you to like get angry by the end of the film. This film wants you to be angry at the end, but at the end of the film, it also wants you to realize that there's nothing you can do about it. Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Right, and that's why I think this documentary is so particularly effective, because you're right, the pace of it and the presentation of the facts are almost leisurely in the way that they do it, and that is much more anger inducing than something just sort of in your face screaming at you like this is a problem and it needs to change. This sort of laissez-faire attitude of the documentary does reflect just exactly where we are and what we can do about it. I mean, the film doesn't offer solutions, which is fine because it shouldn't have to. It's merely pointing out the problem. One of the things it does very well, I thought, was it actually kind of saves for a payoff at the end. They keep kind of cutting to, throughout the documentary, interviews with the 2 pilots of the stealth bombers that effectively started the war in Iraq in 2003, March 19th, 2003, and how excited they were, like, to be these guys who did it, one of them even says, like, how in one's lifetime, how can you ever say that, like, you fired the first shot in this great conflict? And then at the end, and they're excited to do it because they've got this, like, new payload of system where we weren't taking out military targets when that war started. We were in the city, it was in Baghdad. They were bombing, like, Saddam's palace or whatever. So we have these weapons that we're paying billions of dollars for because they can be surgical, quote unquote. Take out this and there'll be very little collateral damage. And then at the end, we discover that these payloads were fired. They didn't hit the targets at all. They ended up missing, not by much, but far enough that when they talked to the people from the hospitals the next day, there was not one soldier in the casualties. It was all civilians. It was all teachers and students and housewives. Better than sort of slamming facts in our face from beginning to end. That was more sobering than anything a more hyped up documentary could have produced.
The way that they present it, it is the guy just keeps going housewife, 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 housewife. It's like, oh my, this is the fucking worst.
Yeah. You know, and at like near the end, they interview the guy who runs the morgue, and I thought for a moment, like, oh, are we finally going to go over the top here? But that is, you know, he effectively just reads the list. I mean, they show us some of the bodies, and you can tell they're all civilians. But once he starts reading the list of the casualties, there's, you know, of the list of maybe like 40 or 50 names he reads, there's maybe 4 soldiers. The rest is all just housewives, child.
Well, and people wonder why no one wants the American values impressed upon them. Because what country would go and bomb the shit out of civilians? Oh, a country who doesn't care about anything else other than money.
Yeah, and that's what we're showing them over and over again when we do this. Like, you know, for as many great TV shows as we're pumping out and celebrities and stuff, whatever ideals the country is actually supposed to stand for, all they're getting from us is this crazy, violent imperialism on a grand scale. I mean, this isn't even like French Guiana or Algiers or something where, you know, a military force would come in and take over like a little section of a place and they would want them gone. This is just like we show up, we bomb them from the sky, and then we take what we need and then we bail. We don't even stay and try and put an infrastructure in.
How dare you say that? We're trying to make Iraq the best country on the planet by having them mirror our values.
That's the other crazy thing. It's like they were these pilots are like so excited with this new technology. Like, oh, we'll be able to blow up this and that. It's like you could have also just dropped a nuclear warhead on them too. You know what I mean? Like if you wanted to, because that was the ultimate effect. Like we're just killing random people left and right. Like none of the leaders that we supposedly were going to be taking out were being harmed.
Well, and that's the crazy part, that they talk about Truman and the nuclear bomb. And obviously that's a debate that will go on forever, is whether or not the ends justified the means. Me personally, no. But I have heard convincing cases just based off of, I don't know, the statistical numbers. But at the same time, when they talk about why Truman said he did it in the film, it's a little horrifying. And by a little, I mean a lot. And by a lot, I mean so fucking much that it's not even funny.
I believe that is 100% fact.
It's like that stupid kid who does stupid shit with fireworks, takes a firework, throws it in a toilet, just wants to see what'll happen. However, you know, when there's millions of Japanese civilian lives at stake, just wanting to see what happened, probably not the best course of action.
I mean, it's half that, and I think it's half to let Russia know that they could be next. And that moment itself, like, if you look at all of the wars sort of presented in the film from World War II to the present, you can make the case that all of the wars since then have been driven by money. Now, World War II, that one seems to be like the one we can all point to and say, like, we were actually fighting for liberty and fighting for democracy. There was a scourge attempting to dominate the world that needed to be beaten back no matter how we did it. So you can look at that war and feel a great swell of pride for America, and then at the very end, Japan was broken. I mean, there was nothing left to it. The documentary says they had been attempting to surrender for, you know, however many months, and we just kept holding off because we wanted to let the world know that once this is over, we're the supreme power, and it sullies everything that came before.
Well, and it makes us look less of international peacekeepers than international shit disturbers. And international genociders. I mean, again, say what you will about dropping the nuke on Japan. In my opinion, it was fucking wrong, but it did get the point across, if that's what we were trying to prove, that we're the big bad guys, that we're the fucking Cobra Kai.
Yeah, a point that could have been just as easily been made had they detonated it off the coast of Japan.
Right.
They would have seen the amount of destruction that could be levied upon them without actually destroying it. Not to mention the second city. You know, let's be realistic. We destroyed Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Well, the second one was just because we could, right?
I guess.
It's so fucking awful to say that, but it's like, we did it just because. Because fuck it, why not? Because we had another nuke. More people needed to die for no reason.
Yeah, we just want to let, again, and it smacks of just like, we want to let people know that wasn't a one-off. We got more, baby.
It's a little bit more of like an eye for an eye, right? It's like, well, they did Pearl Harbor, so...
Yeah, but we already did that with one of their cities. Oh, my God. And by the way, at that point, Japan was leveled completely. Like, we had dropped so many bombs on them. Like, I mean, what were we destroying at that point? Virtually nothing. There were no military bases.
We're turning the sand to glass is what we're doing.
Yeah.
From the nuclear ashes sprang Godzilla. So there you go.
That's the one benefit of the nuclear fire.
The silver lining on the atomic cloud. Jesus Christ.
Is Gojira.
Yeah.
There's a bright spot to this documentary, and it is a fading bright spot. How much of a hero and needs to be more lionized was Dwight D. Eisenhower.
Oh, completely.
He comes off as a fucking hero amidst all of this horrible greed and treacherous behavior from these military industrial scumbags. I mean, clearly he was the one who coined the term, and when he stepped down, he tried to warn everyone that that's where we were going to be going. God damn if we did. An interesting man. This documentary actually made me now want to read more about the man, given the fact that he was a 5-star general who was not all that comfortable with the military.
We haven't had a military commander president in a long time.
Yeah.
What I'm talking about is a president who came from the military, who had a distinguished military career and became president. I mean, you have Trump, businessman. Obama was a senator. He's a lawyer.
Yeah.
George W. Bush was a businessman. Before him, Bill Clinton.
He was a lifer political guy.
Yeah, philandering politico. Other Bush was another lifer, assassinated JFK. And Reagan was an actor.
Yeah, Reagan was an actor. But at least with Bush the senior, like, he had served in the military. He fought in World War II. He ran the CIA. You can look at him and go, like, no matter what his end goals happened to be or where his political leanings were, at least he had fought. At least he did know something about the intelligence community. That cannot be said for maybe our current administration or any of the others. But your point being exactly that as far as a person who had actually experienced a war running the country, it's been a long time.
And I think we need someone like that to kind of, hopefully, similarly to Eisenhower, keep it in check. I mean, you could have the inverse of Eisenhower, which is someone who is in the military and wants more military. However, the thing that cracks me up is you have these politicians who have never had any in-military experience, like Hillary Clinton, who is very much a war hawk, who is in favor of deposing dictators, saying, let's just go do it. And it's like, you don't even understand the concept of what you're doing. You're just a name on a piece of paper, you sign it, and it's done. It's like, what the fuck are we doing here? And that's why we fight so important. It's because you need someone who knows what that means. It's not just a piece of paper and you sign it and it's done. It's like so many working parts that need to come together for you to fully comprehend what you're doing. It's like the guy in the documentary talking about, well, I want to have my son's name put on a bomb. But then he finds out that the bombs were being bombed on Iran, which has nothing to do with 9/11. And he's like, I'm pissed. And I'm like, yeah, you should be pissed. Because your patriotism was taken for a ride, man. A total ride.
And his patriotism was taken for a ride a few times because this is a guy in the documentary who is a former police officer in New York, but had actually served in Vietnam. Not only that, he was a door gunner on a helicopter. And he says what we're saying about the politicians who don't have never been on the ground, have never actually seen it up close, who are just signing a piece of paper. And for him, he was saying, because we were above it all in the air, when I'm shooting at people, I'm not looking at them face to face. They're just dots running left and right, and I'm just firing at those. I never get to see the consequence of it. That's sort of the ultimate irony with that particular thread in this film, is that even though he had felt that he had been lied to with the Gulf of Tonkin and when he was in Vietnam, look, the guy's son died in one of the Twin Towers. So, grief is a heavy motivator. So he did want his son's name on one of those bombs as sort of like a revenge thing. But, in the end, it wasn't an eye for an eye. It was this whole other agenda that his son did not die for, that he was hoping could be somehow ameliorated, and it was not in any way. It's just a morass, man.
This documentary makes me angry. It's one of those things where I'm a huge proponent of conspiracy theories, not because of people, say, like Alex Jones, who, use it to feed off the anger of people. I am a proponent of conspiracy theories because I think people should be questioning things.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
Question everything, because someone else is telling you that one thing is one way, and they may have a reason to tell you that. I mean, history is written by the victors. That's a statement. And if we don't know about our history, we're doomed to repeat it. And if history is written by the victors, then we may get to repeat history because we don't know any better anyways. And the people who write history want us to repeat it, which is why we went into Iraq 2 fucking times, because the people who were in power wanted us to do it a second time and finish the job. Mission accomplished. So that's the whole idea behind this documentary, is that there are people in power that are keeping you in the dark and giving you a false narrative about something that is so crucial and vital to your participation in this country that you should know about. Because if you don't know about it, you are being taken advantage of. My tax dollars are going to good work. Are they, though?
Yeah.
That's the question the film asks.
Absolutely. And, the idea of questioning everything, to me, is absolutely vital, just as a human being. Because the thing is, if you believe in something or you want to believe in something, if you question it and it turns out to be exactly what you thought it was, then you're ahead of the game. And if it turns out to be not what you expected it to be, then you're also ahead of the game. It baffles me, this idea of, a faith in what you already believe, and then you just look for facts to bolster it instead of taking it apart. I'm sure you have too, Chris, things in your life that you believe are one way, and then you question it, and it's painful to discover you were misled or it wasn't what you had initially hoped for. But doesn't that just make you a better person anyway? In this case, with people sort of wholesale buying into slaughter of innocents, so a select few can continue fucking us for money, like as if they don't do it on a daily basis in every aspect of our lives, as if we aren't constantly just grist for the mill. In this case, we are taking that globally and completely tarnishing the reputation of the country that you believe so fervently is the greatest country on earth. It is baffling to me.
That's the whole thing. Like you said, if this is a hard pill to swallow, this film is. But you're better off for it.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's my whole thing. I mean, again, we touched on 9/11 a little bit. Again, I don't think that the government did it, but I think that the government definitely benefited from it happening in a lot of ways. And that's really fucked up to say, but it's the truth.
Right. I don't think the government was involved with the 9/11 plot. Whether or not they knew about it before it happened, I will leave that up to debate. However, the clear conclusion of that thing was that a whole bunch of rich people got richer and a whole lot of American goodwill got squandered because of the greed of a few. I don't know, man. Things have got to change.
This film is important for a lot of reasons, but it's important to get people to think. It's like the Big Brother thing, right? Everybody always made jokes. I mean, even in the 90s when you had shows like The X-Files, you've got Big Brother's always watching you. He's keeping tabs on you at all times. It was a joke. Everyone made jokes about it, but it was a joke that you kind of expected was true. And then, obviously, 6 years ago, you've got Edward Snowden coming out and leaking all the information that the cell phone companies are working with the NSA. And it's like, we fucking, here's the evidence. If you didn't fucking believe it before, you should fucking believe it now. Because here's the evidence and it's smacking you in the face. It's like, there you go.
And the level of complacency continues. It's absolutely mind-boggling.
Edward Snowden is a fucking traitor. And he is a traitor to this country because he exposed the fact that you're being spied on without your knowledge on a daily basis. But hey, he's a fucking traitor for making sure that you knew that.
Right. And, look, I think this is an important film. But when you put it in context of the year it came out, which was 2005, which, if you remember, sort of the political climate after 9/11, where if you were to question the president or the government at all, you became completely and totally vilified. That, in my mind, makes this movie all the more important. That in the midst of the climate, I guess, it's kind of an achievement, like just having made it then, not to mention the fact that it continues to resonate to this day.
Well, and that's what I like so much about this film, and that's why I'm glad that Mike White picked these documentaries, because they're still important now. This is a conversation we need to be having now. We need to, I mean, we do need to focus on the current administration getting themselves into a lot of really bad situations because the people in power are woefully inept at what they're doing and underprepared, but this is still going on. Our country is one or two events away from getting into war with another country, and this is important stuff.
Yeah.
We need to be... I mean, war in Afghanistan is still going on, so, I mean, fuck, man.
Right.
That shit hadn't ended, so...
Yeah, 13 years later.
Yeah. What would you give the film out of 5, Mike?
I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's not a conspiracy theory documentary because I feel like as soon as you say conspiracy theory, people completely check out. But there are parts of it that verge on that, and I think that that's important because to normalize some of the conspiracy theory stuff takes the conspiracy theory out of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's important for a lot of stuff, especially something like this.
This is a documentary that should be broadcast every time we're about to start a new military campaign, just to get people, at the very least, to question the motives behind the war and to question what we're being told are the reasons. It is always who benefits from this. Is it you? Is the American people, or is it like a certain segment of the population?
The scene I think that's the most important scene in the film is you've got, I would say, a senator or congressman in front of the house, and he says, we're awfully quiet for a bunch of people that are deciding whether or not we want to go to war.
Yeah.
Our complacency as a country is what they're taking advantage of. So.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's take a break, and we'll play a preview for the next Culture Cast.
So what are our themes that we deal with in House? We deal with family violence. We deal with suicide. We deal with abortion. We deal with drugs. We deal with alcohol, drunkenness.
Welcome. Your journey has finally brought you to the place of eternal agony. Here you will be subjected to constant torture and everlasting pain. Come. Let us meet those who have swallowed the poison of my life. Let me get her go first. I hate you, God. You did this to me.
What about you? I was gay. What would you do then? Please. Oh, you going to hell, my son?
No.
We're competing for lost souls. It is a war. It is a battle. It is a competition. And there's a serious game where life and death is at stake. And we're going to win.
If you were to die tonight, do you know where you will go?
That's right, on the next Culture Cast, we're going to be talking about yet another joyous motherfucking topic. We're going to be talking about Hell House. No, not Hell House LLC. We'll probably be talking about that film in October. That's a horror found footage film. Hell House is a film about a haunted house in Texas, right outside of where I grew up on the south side of Dallas. That is a non-conventional haunted house, as one would say. It's a haunted house that shows the bad things that happen to you if you don't believe in Jesus, like suicide and abortion. So I am excited for that one. I know you've seen it before, Mike. It's another rough watch.
Yeah, it is, but also an entirely worthy one, and another film that I feel like more people need to see. I've seen it a bunch of times, actually. I think it's pretty masterful and terrifying in all the reasons that the people who are setting up these so-called hell houses could not have anticipated.
Yeah, it's like, imagine Jesus Camp, but a kind of another angle on it. It's another angle of Jesus Camp. Until then, where can people find you, Mr. Wallace?
They can find me on YouTube at OughtFiveFilms. I'm on Twitter. I'm at Father Malone 73. I'm also a co-host of a Tales from the Crypt podcast called Chronicles from the Crypt. You can catch me on there. And I'm also part of a collective that discusses the Twilight Zone 1985 phenomenon. That podcast is called Dreams for Sale. Oh, and if you're in Las Vegas, you can come see me at the Haunted Museum. I'm a tour guide at Zach Bagan's Haunted Museum.
Yeah, that's right. Don't forget to plug that. Don't forget to plug the Haunted Museum now. Oh, Lord.
You were there. You enjoyed it.
I did. I really liked it. Take it from me, first-hand account. If you go to Vegas and you don't go to Zach Bagans' Haunted Museum, you're probably spending too much time on the Strip, which, get the fuck off the Strip. Just get off the Strip. There's more to do in Vegas, guys.
Yeah.
There is. The Strip's fun, but it's like going to New York and spending all your time in Times Square. Come on. There's more to do in Vegas, I promise. Go to the Golden Tiki. Go do something fun. Go to Frankie's. Maybe not. But go to the Zach Bagans' Haunted Museum, for sure. That's right. People can find you on Twitter at FatherMalone73. They can find me on Twitter at CultureStash. Thank you for listening to the show. Head on over to culturecast.com where you can find out more about today's episode. You'll find links to iTunes where you can rate and review the show, and to Patreon where you can give us money if you want to help us take over the world. I copped that one from Mike White. Donors get access to some interesting features. Head on over there if you want to check them out firsthand. Big thanks as always to Eric and Wavoka for our intro song, and my good buddy Justin for our outro song, and to you, Mr. Wallace, for stepping in and filling some big shoes or some little shoes, if you look at it that way.
I'm happy to do it. Thank you.
Yeah, I know. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a friend, as the Golden Girls would say. And we'll see you on the next Culture Cast.
Posted with the crew. You know how we do, I'm just two-step, drink in my right hand, phone in my other hand, getting to the money, oh man, two-step, posted with the crew, yeah, you know how we do.
Hey, two-step, you know what I'm saying, 1, 2, 1, 2, Benjamin, aka the Black T, you know what I'm saying, catch me with my crew every day.